Hello, everyone. My name is Allie Virtue. I'm the host of the Pre-Diet Podcast and a functional medicine nutritionist. And today's episode is awesome. I know I say that every time, and every time I probably say this is my new favorite conversation, but this conversation flowed so well from Dr. Hurley. She is just a wealth of knowledge. So I'm going to get into her intro, her bio, and so we can roll right into this episode. Dr. Erin Hurley spent 25 years as a pediatrician and leader in medicine, including serving as the medical director for a nonprofit child abuse assessment center. She retired from clinical practice and is the founder of Transformational Doc, where she coaches and consults with physicians and healthcare teams who are ready to make a move from exhaustion and depletion towards a life where medicine is a part of who they are, not all consuming. She's also the co-host of Creating Meaning in Medicine, a podcast for healthcare providers ready to have the honest conversations medicine doesn't make space for. Make sure you check her out on LinkedIn and her resources, website, Facebook, social media. She is a wealth of knowledge, but let's jump into this episode. Welcome to the Pre-Diet Podcast, Dr. Erin Hurley. Thanks so much for being here.
It's great to be here. We've been talking about doing this interview for a while.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so excited. And I mean, I had my list of questions, but once we got to just chat the other week in the parking lot of like, hey, what would you like to talk about? And, you know, from the outside, I feel like I had a glimpse of what you do, but then just hearing you briefly talk about all the things that you're passionate about, I was like, oh my gosh, we got to hit record already. Like this is so helpful and so different from what I'm, you know, my scope of skills and tools to help with clients. But I feel like your skill set is just so helpful because it's a lot, I think, of, to me, the intangible that I don't know how to help people with, but I feel like more people really need your skill set, because you were retired, or you're now a retired physician, and then now a burnout coach. How did that happen? Or how did you find yourself in that kind of different career path?
Well, it came from my own burnout, and I didn't call it burnout. I struggle with what's the language, because burnout can be a triggering. I was just on a meeting this morning with my virtual assistant, and one of the words I've been using is flourish. Can we use flourish? And I work mostly with women who work in healthcare settings, such as physicians, PAs, NPs, and the word flourish in a medical career right now sounds a bit like an oxymoron, because it's not congruent for many people. It's just a very complicated career to be in. And so I really related to the words exhausted, overwhelmed, and didn't have a lot of time with my family. I was overcommitted. And when I was 20 years into my career at age 50, I had a pity party and was working from home, and I was sick. So all of these things. And I was like, I'm just going to celebrate my birthday all year long. And when I got a call a few weeks later to hire a coach, I didn't ask permission. I didn't know what I was getting. I said yes, handed him my credit card, and my life completely began to change. I began getting home 2 to 4 hours earlier. My husband stopped complaining within about 6 weeks, because he was like, whoa, this coaching thing is really making a difference. And that was 9 years ago. And my life is nothing like it was before, and all for the better. And when I realized, if my coach can do this for me, I could do the same for others. And so I began hosting workshops. I got certified in not 1, not 2, but 3 coaching certifications, because the people I deal with are complicated, and I need to be prepared for that. And one of the lenses you talked about that I have that's different than many is I worked in child abuse medicine for the last decade of my pediatric career. And it was a calling. I don't know how I possessed the things I did to get through the stories I heard during that decade. I became the medical director. I was the medical director during the pandemic and worked with law enforcement, DHS, DA's offices. And I learned a lot about trauma. And trauma affects all of us. And in medicine, we get a special dose of it, most of us, because of the work that we do. And because of that, 10 years I spent learning about trauma. I went to a trauma conference in Oxford, England last fall to learn even more about trauma from the world experts like Bessel van der Kolk and Gabor Mate. And it really helps me better understand human behavior. And I practiced medicine for for the first 15 years and had never heard of this study called the ACEs study, which you and I talked about the other day, by Dr. Vince Felitti. It came out, I always forget if it's 1997 or 1998. It doesn't say it here on this paper, a long time ago. And many people who work in medicine have never heard of it. And it basically is asking questions about exposures you had in childhood that are called adverse childhood experiences. And they include things like, were you physically abused, sexually abused? Did you have a parent incarcerated? Did you lose a parent to divorce or death? So a list of 10 questions. And what he found in this groundbreaking study is that the more yeses you have in these 10 questions, the more likely you will have almost any chronic health condition as an adult, including weight issues, obesity, mental health issues, suicidality. And if we don't have a clue about our own history of trauma exposure and those we work with, so as a physician, if I was getting frustrated, why can't my patient just comply with their asthma meds and they would stay out of the hospital? For you, it might be, why can't they just stick to this regimen of healthy nutrition? Why do they keep reverting back? And what I found is that when you understand trauma and things that were wired into us sometimes before we were born, what was happening to our mother during the pregnancy, and even generations back, because it gets imprinted into our DNA. And then through our lifetime, we have what's called epigenetics that changes how our DNA is expressed. And the impact of stress and trauma will change not only how your DNA is expressed, but also how your brain is wired, especially in the first 3 years of life. And if we go through life and we have no idea how that's impacting us, how the trauma of generations before you arrived in this world impact you, it can make us very critical of what we see as failures and get more in the way of us having success in the goals that we set for ourselves. So for me, I am so grateful for that unique trauma lens that I have that's very different than many physicians, than many coaches, than many individuals, because I work with people. And when I understand what might be driving some of those people's behaviors, it helps me get into their head, even if they're thinking very different than me, and go, oh, now I understand. Oh, that makes complete sense.
Absolutely. There's so much there. And I think one is acknowledging it. Someone asked me recently of like, how do you deal with like the emotional side of nutrition and nutrition coaching? I was like, oh my gosh, how long do you have? Because I feel like that's a lot of it. You can Google a decent amount of information as far as like the science of nutrition, and you can find there's always matching the science to fit the person, right? I mean, everybody's, especially medical providers. I just got off the phone with a night shift NICU nurse, and like her set of like parameters she's working with, she's an hour commute each way, working night shift. She's young. She wants to do all the things with her friends. Like that's not a normal scenario compared to probably someone who isn't working in medicine. So there's definitely that a little bit of a lot of bit of tweaking when it comes to like the general healthy things to do, and then fitting that to a medical provider, even if you were to take out all the stress, the trauma that they see, because I think it's so normalized. I've seen that over and over again with other types of medical workers of like, well, yeah, but I should be doing this. I'm like, but you had a really traumatic ER shift, like, and now you can't sleep to help recover from that. Like, it's just not the same set of scenarios. And I feel like they beat themselves up because like, I should just be doing that. I'm like, that's a really hard situation to deal with. Like, that's not a fault of discipline, I don't think.
Well, and it's not just for healthcare providers. My husband is a firefighter medic, and, ambulance crews, first responders, even teachers. You look at the things we are doing every day, and especially if we feel like we don't have control, we've lost our agency, and then that just makes it worse. But getting back to the point of, what we're exposed to, if somebody if they're dealing with the stress of their kid in school, if they're dealing with an aging parent. So, I don't know how many of your clients are women versus men. I've done a lot of studying about how women are different. And not only might they be working full time and managing their job, they are still taking care of more of the household and childcare duties, and oftentimes caretaking for extended family members, for the parents, the in-laws, and it's we call it the second shift for women. And
Yeah.
we need to be aware of all those factors that are impacting us. And sometimes it takes an outside perspective, like for you to point out those blind spots, to help challenge, to work through some of those issues, and also to hold accountability, because some of us, myself included, really need that external accountability. So for me as a coach, for you as a nutritionist, that accountability that we can hold for our clients really can be one of the breakthroughs, not only with your expertise and information, the accountability. Oh, I got my session with Allie. I better make sure I, do my food journal. I better make sure that I'm paying attention to my nutrition, and showing up sometimes more for someone else than we will for ourselves.
Absolutely. How does I guess two questions of how did your journey, I mean, you talked a little bit about finding a coach and starting to, you know, improve your situation that way. How does someone who might be like, well, maybe I'm burned out, but I think a lot of times, again, they're like, well, I don't want to label it that because then I might have to do something about it. But how does that start if someone is wondering of like, maybe I am approaching, significant burnout in my career? What might be the first steps to kind of help themselves out?
Well, one is awareness. And what I've learned a lot about burnout and mental health issues in women in medicine. I have a podcast with another physician coach who's a psychiatrist. So we've talked a lot about these issues. And one of the things is, for physicians, we show up differently. We have been conditioned to get through hard things, to ignore our bodies. We don't eat, we don't go to the restroom, we don't sleep, all throughout our training. So we are taught to be more like a robot than a human being. And we can get disconnected from what we're feeling, how we're doing emotionally, because, you're an ER doc and something just happened in bay 1 and somebody might have died. And now you got to go to bay 2 and take care of this other patient who it still needs your help. So we do a lot of compartmentalizing, and your listeners may have to do that in a different way. And so one is awareness. For me, I was irritable. I was kind of grouchy a lot of the time, and my husband thankfully put up with it. I hopefully I'm a much better wife and parent now than I was before. But more irritability, difficulty winding down. You can't sleep even when you're exhausted. This feeling like dread is a common term that I hear, overwhelm. And I would ask the listener to think, what if nothing changes? Because I know in medicine we have a lot of delayed gratification. So we get used to, when I'm done with undergrad, when I'm done with medical school, when I'm done with my residency training, when I get used to this new job, when the kids get done with preschool, whatever that is, delayed gratification. And yet life happens along that journey. And if you ask yourself, what if nothing changes in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years? Are you okay with that?
Feels scary.
And if not, get some input. For me, I remember isolating myself from my girlfriends because I was too busy. And after 20 years, my coach says, Erin, where's your girlfriends? And I was like, I don't know. They only get to see me if I work with them. We do karate together, or we go to a fundraiser. Those are the only times that I allow myself permission. And in these last 9 years, with her first prompting, 3 months after I started working with her and I started redeveloping my relationships with my girlfriends, I got breast cancer. Who do you need when you get a diagnosis like that? Your girlfriends, because chances are some of them have gone through this as well. So that having the right people you trust that you can ask, maybe it's your partner, maybe it's a mentor, maybe it's a friend, but being able to ask someone, what do you notice? Because sometimes we can be blind to our own issues. And do you have the capacity to listen? And I talk a lot about mindset. There are a lot of people in medicine with a fixed mindset. I have to be the smartest in the room. I have to figure it out myself. I have to be independent. I should be able to DIY this. If Allie knows this nutrition stuff, I can figure it out, right? Let me go Google or AI it. And yet I've found I will gladly pay someone for the years they have spent developing
Mhm.
their expertise. Because what happens is that you can go from point A to point B that are very far away, that you need to close that gap really quickly. For me, with my hiring my coach, when I realized something's got to give, I don't want to have a pity party on my 51st birthday. I've had enough. And it was also a leap of faith. And I'm not, I sometimes will just dive right in and not go to analysis paralysis. So I'm grateful for that sometimes, because that allowed me to say yes to this opportunity that 9 years later, and still most doctors I know have never worked with a coach, have not heard of coaching in medicine. And for those of us who have, we're like, hallelujah, this is so helpful. Everybody needs a coach and a therapist to have at their disposal with the type of work we do. And so when you have awareness and then you go, let's dig into this, that awareness, that knowledge isn't going to help you unless you are open-minded enough to listen to outside perspective and do something about it.
Absolutely. How do you help people become more open-minded? Because I do see a lot of that, especially working with either high performers in general, but like also medical providers. Because I agree, like no one's saying that you're not smart, but you don't have to specialize in nutrition. Like I love this stuff, and I was like, you love your specialty, and I know nothing about that. Like that's why everybody has specialties, and they develop their craft, like you said. How do you help someone develop that so they can really get the most out of the experience, and being open to that potentially new information or at least new strategies?
I don't have the magic answer to that. If I did, I would have clients coming out my ears on a long waiting list. Unfortunately, the people I focus on are people who, like, I'm ahead of the curve. And even though coaching's been around forever, I liken hard professions like going into medicine to a competitive sport, going to the Olympics, being a professional athlete. Lots of sacrifice, years of dedication, lots of delayed gratification, hard work. And yet, and you don't see the Olympians or maybe people going to the World Cup without a coach or multiple coaches.
Oh yeah.
And yet in medicine, the norm is you don't have a coach. Even therapists were not usually tapped into because of lots of stigma and such. And so I wish it was normalized. And there's a growing number of physician coaches in medicine. But also, what about teachers? What about women leaders? What about people of colors? Like, there is so much benefit, and coaching is unique, different than therapy. But what I know is that when you're open to going to, whether it's a therapist, seeking out a mentor, seeking out a coach, you're already shifting into growth mindset, because you're like, what I'm doing isn't really working. Or maybe the pain point is so painful that you're like,
Mhm.
I don't want to go there. And yet, for me, 7 years before I hired my coach, my youngest son was in the hospital with systemic juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. So, for those of you who aren't
Oh wow.
medical specialists, that's a really scary illness. It can have lifelong implications, have really horrendous outcomes. And he's in the hospital, and I'm so buried and overwhelmed and overcommitted. I was the lead physician in my clinic. He's in the hospital, and I'm checking with my team saying, is there something you need me to support you in? Working on my own charts instead of focusing on him. That was a really painful point. And I look back at that. It took me 7 more years to hire the help I needed.
Mhm.
And then 6 weeks later, I'm having completely different results because I was open, I listened, and I took action quickly. And that's the power of, specifically with coaching, different than therapy,
Mhm.
is what do you have control over? And how can you leverage that control to get much different outcomes? I didn't have to change jobs, my husband, my kids, I was able to keep all those things, and I showed up differently because I began to have a growth mindset, much different. I used to be that I know everything, I can't learn from anybody who's not a doctor, that type of mentality. But
Mhm.
something shifted, I think, out of that pain of like, I don't want to have a pity party on my next birthday. And why
Mhm.
didn't I choose differently? Why didn't I ask for help instead of working from home sick before working from home was a thing?
Absolutely. So we start with awareness and kind of kind of taking a true, honest look at someone's situation. Is it always a coach? Is it sometimes people need therapy as well? Like, what's that next step of like, how does someone figure out what kind of professional do I need in that situation?
There are many individuals, at least that I work with in medicine, who have a therapist and a coach. And sometimes my coaching has helped them get ready to meet with their therapist. Sometimes their therapist has helped them deal with some things and they're still stuck. And so that coaching piece is the next step. For some people, their therapist is aware of coaching and specific coaches. So you can have a mismatch, whether it's with a therapist, a coach, a mentor, a peer relationship. And so being really discerning, or even asking someone who looks to be more successful than you and say, how are you doing that? Can you give me some time to share some of the secrets to your success? And they might share with you, oh, this is what I do. Maybe it's a habit. And so looking for people who are getting outcomes that are more like what you want, and also getting clear on more of what you want instead of just knowing what you don't want. Because it's easy to get stuck in that complain mode. Like, I don't like, not getting a lunch break. I don't like whatever it is that you're not happy with. Taking the time to get clear on what you want is a very different process. It takes more energy and time. And a lot of times bouncing ideas off of another person can get you clarity so much more quickly. And clarity is one of the things I work with my clients on a lot, because they're so busy focused on everyone else that they're the last in line and they never get to the top of their priority list. And so it's about, I ask questions and they're like, I have no idea. I haven't thought that deeply about myself. Or maybe they don't even know themselves. And so there's not one right path. I think the path is, if you're aware that I don't want things to stay the same, and then getting curious. That's one of my favorite things to talk about, is curiosity, getting curious about what's possible. Do some Googling, put it in your AI search about what are things that are possible for my specific situation. And again, connecting. So you and I know each other through multiple women's business groups and the Salem Chamber, and we've interacted many times before. I know you. I get to know you more and find out and get curious, finding out other people who are working with people and who are they working with, to give you some guidance, especially if it's in an area that you don't know. I got lucky. The first coach that I got matched with happened to have been a therapist before, and then they pivoted to coaching. Their dad was a doctor, their brother was a doctor, and their ex-husband was a doctor. So even though she wasn't a doctor, she knew all about my woes, and she had these skill sets. She was a death doula. She'd studied with shaman in Peru. So I got matched very well, and that was maybe luck and being clear in who I was so that the program I signed up with could do a good match. We don't always have a good match. So I would also say, don't, throw it out just because that first try wasn't right for you. And I remember reading the book, The Body Keeps the Score, which is a really in-depth book by a world-renowned expert, Bessel van der Kolk. And I remember reading it, and he is a physician, psychiatrist. He's worked with so many different groups of individuals. And one of the threads that I remember in this book was that some of these individuals, especially that dealt with a lot of trauma in their lives, they tried one thing and another and another. They might have tried for 20 years. They didn't give up. And then they found that therapy that worked for them. And, maybe it was group therapy with people who dealt with like things. Maybe it was EMDR, which is a specific kind of therapy that can be used for post-traumatic stress disorder and other things. And so the first therapist, the first coach, the first mentor may not be the right fit. And so as one business coach told me a couple years ago, try it, but not for too long if it's not working out. And then you can just adjust. So that getting curious, like telling yourself, let's do a pilot program. Let's try it out. I do this with my clients a lot. Try this for 2 weeks. Try it for a month. You don't have to commit forever. And then if it doesn't work, you can go back to the old way, or you can adjust to course correct and get closer to what you're looking for.
I think that's such a great point. I've heard multiple people now, being about 10 years in, of like, it's one of my favorite lines, but she's like, hi, my name is so and so, and I've been dieting for 30 years or longer than you've been alive. Why will you be any different? I'm like, awesome. And she's right, right? But I don't think if their goal is really important, there's no point in quitting, is what has always come to mind for me. If it's still really important to me, like, it doesn't matter if it takes it 10 years, 15 years, 16 years, whatever, like, I still want it. Right. And I think that's also, I love like getting curious, or like, let's practice it. Let's try it. I think while I love having sustainable habits, I think sometimes we can also use that as an excuse too early, because people will try it for a little bit. They're like, this isn't sustainable. I can't do it forever. I'm like, well, let's just try it for 2 weeks and
Yeah.
see how it goes, and maybe find a different form of it that is sustainable, but get information from it. Go ahead.
And that brings up a great point. So, one of the things, especially with the high achieving individuals I tend to work with, is they set the bar so high. Oh, I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to run a marathon, right? So they set this incredibly high bar, and they're already overwhelmed. And many of them have, they score themselves a 3 out of a score of 1 to 10 on their energy levels. How are you supposed to do a full-time job working in medicine and then have any energy to do something new with an energy level of a 3 out of 10? Almost impossible. And so, one of the things that I've learned from how to create new habits and how to make them stick is, if you imagine the high jump and they've got the rack that holds the bar. And what I say is, we're going to take that bar off the rack, we're going to set it on the ground. So all you have to do is step over this tiny little bar on the ground. It's going to be so easy that you can't not do it. Easy, easy, easy. And then you take that 1% little change, and then you do it again the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And in 6 weeks, 6 months, a year, each of those little incremental investments that you made that did not overwhelm you further are going to get you closer and closer, better than trying too much. And then, as you said, giving up and saying, nope, this isn't going to work. And then quitting altogether, that tiny little investment. And, getting into habit formation. There's 2 other points I want to make with this. One is celebrating those wins. For me, I am not somebody who goes to the gym without accountability like a personal trainer. And so I told myself, you are going to jog, don't care how slow, 0.8 miles, because that gets me down my street, down to the end of the cul-de-sac, around and back. 0.8 miles. Once you start jogging, you cannot quit. And that's all you have to do, 0.8. And I can do it in less than 20 minutes. No excuse. And that has been much easier than get in the car, drive to the gym, go run on the treadmill, go lift weights. I thought, this is where I'm going to start. And then that's going to build my energy. And then I'll get to the next stage and the next stage. But it's super easy. And then the other thing is celebrating those wins. Yay, I just ran 0.8 miles.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo. Share it with my husband. Guess what I did today?
Yeah.
And when we lock in the positive wins, it makes it easier to celebrate the more you practice that. There's something called the reticular activating system in our brain, which is the filter that things come through. So think about all the things you are exposed to, the sounds, the things you're seeing, your tactile, your sensory, what are you smelling, what do you taste, all of those things. You can't possibly acknowledge all of those. So we have a filter, RAS for short. And when you learn to lock in those positive things and look for those wins, it gets easier and easier to do that. And because our brain has a negative bias, which means to keep us alive, back when there were lions and tigers at the watering hole, we needed to have a negative bias to stay alive, to be able to get our food and our water and our shelter and all that. So because of that, our brains are wired to immediately lock in anything negative. The positive stuff takes longer, maybe 10 to 20 seconds to lock in, and needs more intention. And so I also encourage you, if you're really trying to make changes, is to train your filtering system to start looking for the positive and to lock it in and celebrate it, because that's going to create this forward momentum in your life that's going to be much better than, oh geez, Erin, I'm talking about myself. I was supposed to go on my 0.8 mile jog, very slow jog yesterday, and I got busy getting set up for a workshop that I'm hosting this weekend, and I didn't get to it. I didn't beat myself up. I thought, I'll try to get to it tomorrow. I did it the day before, and I let it go, as opposed to, you're such a loser. Why can't you just? And I thought, it's not going to make or break me. I'll get back to it.
So that's what always keeps me kind of sane, because it's fascinating to me now that, again, just like being in this industry and in coaching in general probably just makes you aware of like your thoughts as well. But like starting a running habit, it's actually John Moore at the chamber that got me to start, because I kept talking about this habit forever. And he's like, why don't you do just enough so that you look forward to it the next time? And that really helped me, because initially when I said I'm going to go on my first little run, I thought of like, well, it has to be X amount of miles or distance or time or whatever. And I'm just like, who is this voice? Why does like this doesn't, the point is just to go. And that was so much more fun and interesting for me versus like letting that negative voice be like, well, it doesn't count if you don't do this. Cause I'm like, that's made up. Like that voice, I don't need to listen to it. But I'd love to go back to your analogy of the high jump, because I think that's such a great visual. I love sports analogies in general, but also like when you see people at those events, one, they've trained for years, obviously, and like that's their peak performance. Like they're jumping the highest they possibly can, versus when you had that visual up, I instantly thought of people, and especially high performers, trying to jump that max height like every day, versus like that's like your medical school graduation, right? Like all your effort is going to that. But like that's not an expectation you would have for yourself every day. But I think that's definitely what a lot of people try to do. And I heard my husband say something similar of like, he's like, I think I'm growing in too many areas of life at the moment, like pushing in business, signed up for a sprint triathlon, always trying to work on his overall health and gut health. And then we have a farm, just like all the things, and just said yes to too many things at one time. But I thought that was a great way to put it. He's like, I think I'm growing too fast in too many areas at once. Maybe I should, bring it back a little bit and bring that bar down a little bit. Like put it at a height that you can jump every single day, instead of being like, well, I jumped that yesterday, so I should be able to max out my jump again today. It's like, that's insane. Those athletes don't do that every day. That's a peak thing.
Yeah.
Peak performance.
And sustainability. And that's something that I address with clients that are working in a really hard field, is if it's not sustainable. Like the question I asked at the beginning was, what if this stays the same in 6 months, 6 years? Is that okay? Is that pace okay? And we talk a lot about, you can't run the marathon at a sprint's pace. It's not going to happen. And the way you do it makes a difference too. The support you have, a lot of these athletes have a team. Some of them have multiple coaches. They have supporters along the way. And if you're only looking at, man, look at how successful they are, why can't I just do it like them? You don't see where they started and how difficult things were in the beginning, nor the support behind the scenes. You might just be seeing their finished product and comparing yourself to that instead of all the messy stuff that this individual is going through. And when we can have more grace and self-compassion for ourselves, one concept I share is about our mindset. And you are with your own mindset 100% of the time. There is no one who has more influence over you than you. And why do you want to be your biggest critic? How can you be your biggest fan and cheer yourself on? Find love and compassion and grace, not to give excuses, but to say, well, it totally makes sense that I didn't do my 0.8 mile jog yesterday, but man, I knocked it out of the park getting prepared for my workshop on Saturday. And so can I say it wasn't like I was sitting around, watching TV and eating bonbons? So again, look for those things that can give you some grace, or check in with somebody who can help you learn to give more grace. Ask them for their opinion, and you might hear a whole bunch of nice things about yourself that you aren't willing to tell yourself.
That's such a great point because yeah, generally our harshest critic versus you see someone and I'm like, wow, they are crushing it, and meanwhile they think they're struggling or not doing enough. But I'm like, you are managing so many things, and I really admire how you do that. I'd love to circle back to clarity because I think that's a big thing. We want it all, we want it right now, and we wanted it yesterday. But how do you help somebody create a little bit more clarity in their life so they know what they want instead of just saying, well, I want all of the things?
We have to pause. And when I'm working with these individuals who have such fast paced lives, I liken it to like a bullet train. You are going so fast, you have no idea. Are those flowers by the side, looking out the window of the bullet train? Is that a flower? Is that, what color is that? Everything's just a blur. Yet if you walked that same path and even stopped to pause, you're going to see, oh, not only is this a flower, I can tell it's a daisy. And look, there's a little bee in there pollinating. And you'll see all the little details. If we don't slow down long enough to examine what's going well in our lives, what's not, and paying enough attention to ourselves that we can ask, what do I want? And write it out, journal, have some conversations. It really takes slowing down and asking yourself good questions. So your brain, your subconscious likes to answer questions. And so if you can start asking questions, if you use AI, you can, ask your AI, hey, give me some questions that's going to help me find clarity in this. And then you ask yourself the question, and then you noodle on it, and then you just let it sit, planting seeds and then feeding them with time. So maybe it's a daily, maybe it's a weekly, maybe it's a monthly habit where you spend time with yourself, not consuming, reading, podcast, all of those things. Sometimes music can help, movement, taking a walk out in nature without your phone. For some, maybe doing an adult coloring book might be helpful, doing some artwork, pottery. So tapping into creativity in ways that you might not expect, your hobbies and things, that can help fuel our creative brain in order to get us unstuck from just using our higher functioning thinking brain. I'm pointing to the front of my forehead here, like our executive functioning brain. And it's hard to just think things. It's about, what are my feelings? How's my body feel? And let all of those things come together to help you find clarity. You might think, I want to run a marathon. And then you have this gut check and your gut goes, ugh. And it's like, oh, maybe that's not the right way for me to get in shape. If my gut feeling is, no way, because now your gut intuition is going to be, working against you. So really paying attention to that. And it really takes slowing down and reflecting. And I know that the power of journaling, when I began working with my own coach, she would take notes for me, but I also had a specific notebook that I took notes in, and we worked together for 6 years. So I have lots and lots of notes. And when I learned to go back to my notes, and that's how I know, within 6 weeks, I was going home 2 to 4 hours earlier than I had before I worked with my coach. 6 weeks, because it's in my notes when I started. I also know it took me 18 months to go to yoga after I first started talking to my coach about going to yoga. So I could tell where I was stuck and where I was not stuck. And then going through, I could also see, does this resonate? Do I even want to go to yoga? Maybe I'm not going because I'm not interested in it. Cross it off my list. So by having a footprint of where are you now? Where do you want to go? And then revisiting that in some kind of pattern, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, that will give you clarity on where you've come from. We don't always look back and go, oh man, I've made a lot of progress. And then that's going to help you, or I'm stuck. What else do I need to help me get unstuck? To then move you in a direction. So if you're clear, then you're going to be able to figure out what are the levers that you can pull that are going to give you more leverage to get there.
I love that answer because it gives so much. In my brain, I want like an answer, like, Erin, what do you ask people to have them get clarity? But it does speak to the process of all of this, right? Because people, like, I think the analogy for my line of work would be, Allie, how many calories should I be eating? Or like, what should my meal plan be? As if it's like a finite prepackaged answer of like, how do I find my purpose in life, Erin? Like, how should I spend my days? Versus it's not an instant thing. It's not something that I could be like, you ask the right question, I have the right answer. Because you're totally right. I could say things that sound great out loud and on paper as far as like clarity of goals or life goals and things like that. But yeah, when you get into, I know exactly when you said like gut feeling, I've said goals like that before, and then my gut goes, you're not going to do that. But it takes time to realize that, like, yeah, I'm not going to spend my time that way. It's great. That might be a goal for somebody else. But that, I mean, what you just said, and it's not a simple set of questions, but it's a journey. And
having somebody on that journey with you, I have found just bringing one more person into the conversation besides myself, man, the problem solving it's exponential. And I talk about the numbers. And if you have one person, one number, what math can you do?
Not a lot. Yeah.
Nothing. Zero.
Yeah.
There is no math with one number. It's just a number. You add one more number, one more person, you can add, multiply, use exponential math. So 1 + 1 doesn't have to equal 2. It might equal 0. Well, 1 - 1, right? If it's 1 and a -1. Anyway, well, we won't go too far there. But you can have a session where you are talking with somebody. And this is where, as a coach, when I'm meeting with my year-long clients weekly, and I'm asking them those questions to get clarity, I'm asking them those questions to help them figure out purpose. I have a session for that. I talk to them about how to gain more influence in their life. And so we're spending an hour, not by themselves an hour, the two of us together. And so I am fueling that hour spent. Most of the time, I would say it's at least exponential, because the power of the two of us talking it out, somebody pointing out the blind spots, challenging them if they're having a fixed belief about something. It's incredible how much. I remember going to the retreat I hosted a couple months ago, and one of my clients was showing up for her second year, and I was like, how is it showing up this year different than last year? It was night and day. This individual had grown so much. And to see that, it fuels me on why I do this, because I get to help individuals grow beyond what they think is capable, because you add that one extra person. So, and it doesn't, whether it's a coach, a therapist, a mentor, a nutritionist, somebody with enough caring about you that they're invested in your success, and just bouncing ideas off of. Some of us process verbally, just having that other person to listen. It's like, I just came up with this amazing idea, and they didn't have to say anything. So don't underestimate the power of one more person and how they might be able to help you change your trajectory when you do get clear on what you want to do.
It's so powerful. I mean, I think that does come up in so many realms of coaching and wellness, of like when you have your people, or you find your people that do make it easier for you and help you. I mean, some of the best conversations I think I've ever had with my husband are just on walks. Just giving yourself the time to like talk things through. And sometimes like they don't really say anything, and like I just say it out loud, and I'm like, wow, that was so helpful, so therapeutic, and you might have said 2 words. And sometimes it's different. Sometimes obviously they chime in more, and it's helpful in a different way. But can you talk a little bit about how you work with clients? Because I think sometimes I get that of like, people are like, well, you just give me a meal plan, right? Of like, you just give me a roadmap to like not be burned out anymore, right? Some solid habits. But what does that look like from kind of getting a client started? What does that journey look like for a new client?
Well, step 1 is, are we a great fit? And as a physician, I needed to know, what are my limits? And if I was seeing a patient that was beyond my, what we call a scope of practice, beyond my knowledge of expertise, then I would refer them to a specialist. For me as a coach, I have such integrity is a huge part of my business. I don't want someone to work with me. I never want to waste their time, which is their most precious commodity, their energy, their focus, their finances. I don't want to waste any of that. So the first thing I do is make sure, is this a good fit? And so if somebody's interested in working with me, the first thing we do is jump on a 30 or 60-minute call. I have them fill out a questionnaire so I can prepare and recognize, where are they struggling? What are the things that I can have available so we can work through some things, even in that first connection. And then if we agree that it's a good fit and that they would get benefit from working with me, then I talk to them about the different programs. And my favorite client is one who's ready to, they realize I'm not going to fix these issues in 6 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever. So they can dabble. I've had I call it an a la carte program where, oh, you want to try, 4 to 6 sessions with me. We can do that. And it works for some people. The ones who really make the difference, my 1-year clients, and we meet weekly, and sometimes we'll spread it out to every other week. But oftentimes they are dealing with so many complicated levers that having that weekly session really helps them keep things moving forward. I liken it to when I went with working with my coach week 1 to week 6, there was this very steep curve for me of all the changes that were happening. And I want them to build some momentum and keep that going. And so again, I have a year-long program, and then I have had little sprint programs where we focus on one small area. So, but it's always getting to know each other and finding out, am I a good fit? I'm not for everyone. I can have a lot of energy and work, fast, talk fast. And if I'm not the right one, then I say, I wonder if this might be a resource, or that maybe you could benefit from some counseling and this, or starting there. So it's always getting to know each other first, and then seeing, is this a good fit? Is it a good fit now? Do they have the time, the bandwidth, the resources, the finances to make that investment? And are they willing to prioritize themselves enough? Because I remember meeting with one potential client, and I said, I need your time for about an hour a week to get started, at least for a handful of weeks, and then we can spread it out. But I need you to be able to commit to that. And if they're not willing to commit to themselves that much, then I don't want to waste their resources because they're not ready.
That makes sense, because I think especially with that demographic of high performers, they're like, I'll fix this. I'll work on this at the same time I work on this. And it's like, again, to my husband's good phrasing of like growing in too many areas at once, like you're spreading yourself too thin, and it'll be a frustrating process because you want the best for them as well, but it does take time.
And the specific people I work with, I don't know all the details of other professions. Physicians have a very high pain threshold. And what I find, and it's sad to me, is that I liken it to like a car is headed for the cliff and it's just about to tip over the cliff, or if you're just listening and not watching, like my hand is like this car teetering on the edge of a cliff, and any other movement forward and they're just going to go careening off the cliff. And that's usually how bad things are when a physician or woman in medicine decides to call me. And even at that, if they get enough help that that car backs up maybe a centimeter or two and is no longer going to careen with any tiny movement, but they're back to that kind of precariousness, but what they've been used to, then they're like, oh, I'm good. Or they say, as things are getting really complicated, I'll reach back out to you when things settle down.
They actually settle down though.
Yeah. And either they do or they don't. I don't know. Because a lot of them, they just kind of go back to the DIY, and I think, I wish I had this help. I imagine going through my breast cancer diagnosis, and my mom was going through declining Alzheimer's in another state, and I just had this year. Had I not hired my coach that June and had her beside me, I remember talking to her the day of my biopsy. And actually when I hadn't had my results yet, but on that morning of my biopsy to find out, do I have cancer or not, I got off the call with my coach. I had a super ugly cry. And then I got this huge realization. It was as if like this finger of God or the universe pointed at me and it said, Erin, no matter what the results are, you've got this.
Yeah.
And it was this sense of relief going, you're right, I do. And it allowed me to walk through this cancer diagnosis and treatment like a courageous lion instead of like a meek little mouse. Oh my gosh, I have cancer. And I did get the diagnosis, and I handled it so well. And I think, had I not had that coach walking alongside me, all of the things that happened, any one of them could have knocked me off of my foundation. But I found this resource that helped me get to a much more stable place. And it allowed me to deal with the turbulence of life. It's coming. And for some of us, a lot of it comes all at once. And you're like, geez, universe, can you just knock it off? Right? Many of us have had years like that or time periods like that. And so for me, it was a real lifeline and allowed me to get through that turbulence much better supported and with way better skills. And I remember being I was either in the hospital around the time of my surgery or in the clinic room, and we found out that the power in my house had been turned off. I'm in a different state getting my treatment, and the nanny's at the house with the 3 kids, and the power gets shut off. And I ask, are the neighbors, do they have power? Yeah. Okay. And I was like, oh crap, I forgot to pay the power bill. It went off of auto pay. And I was so busy and I ignored it one too many times. So then we were laughing hysterically, going, okay, we got to call the neighbors. Can they help the nanny? We got to call the power. We got it all figured out. As opposed to freaking out and just making this big conundrum, we can laugh and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. Yep, life got pretty busy. I messed up. And it's fixable. And it was on within a few hours. The neighbor brought over some meatloaf for my kids so they didn't starve. Everything turned out okay. And I was so grateful that I had the willingness to invest in myself and, paid to sign up for my coach the first 12 weeks and then again and again, many times over. And it made future me so happy and so much more supported. And my marriage and my relationship with my kids, that has been the gift that keeps on giving for the better. And again, was so great that's why I love doing it for others. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
yes, I can't even remember my question, but I think you answered the one I was going to answer next, because I'm just picturing a woman woman or professional that is handling all the things. And because I'll get a similar thing of like, I'll reach out about my nutrition when I have more time. And there's a fact about that of like, yes, if I don't have time to, talk to you for 30 to 60 minutes a week, like, yeah, it's not going to work because you're going to need to put not time just for that call, but time into these new habits that we talk about and journaling and all of that work. But I was going to ask, like, what does that woman have to look forward to? Because I think when you're in the thick of it, you can't see a solution. You can't see an alternative reality where like you're not doing charts on a Sunday. I know you've talked about that. I've heard family members who are in medicine talking about that, of like working outside of their work hours to just catch up with work, and that bleeds into their family life and they want more from that as well. Like they can't really see that new reality that might be the goal for them. But I think what you painted was also pretty perfect of like, you're able to deal with a diagnosis because we don't know if that stuff or when that stuff is coming. Usually it comes in some form, whether it's us or a family member. But I think you painted it so well if you're able to cope with that stuff instead of it truly being awful and stressful,
and
even more stressful.
Yeah, for me, that working with a coach really allowed me to have additional bandwidth and to have a different perspective. And even I think of another client that I worked with, and she was able to remove, 15 or 20 hours of work a week because I helped her organize how she did her charts and how she did her workflow. And she's now spending time with her family evenings and weekends, and her spouse is so happy. Like he's talking to all of their friends who are doctors going, you need to give Erin a call. And I think, okay, how much does that mean to her child when she gets to be spending time with them instead of sitting in front of her computer doing charts? How meaningful that is it for her relationship with her spouse now that they have their wife back. So it can really, you can use coaching, and even for people who just show up for the hour that I work with them and they don't have time to do any homework or journaling or anything in between, just that hour dedicated to themselves and shifting perspectives. It is so amazing what big changes can happen. And it gives you your agency back, your empowerment back. And I look at it for myself as that I was in a victim mode. Oh, poor me. It's my birthday. I'm working from home. I'm sick. Nobody appreciates me. And maybe, people can relate to that. To, if you don't like your outcomes, what are you going to do about it? What do you have control over? And I shifted from victim mode, oh, poor me, to empowered mode. Oh, I have a breast cancer diagnosis. Okay. Who do I need to see? Who's going to be on my team? What extra support do I need? How do I need my family to lean in? Just going into empowerment mode, what do I have control over? And even for people who work in systems that are like the school system as a teacher, or the hospital system as a hospital employee, like the corporation has issues. I bet it does. And yet, if you work on the issues that you have control over, like for me, I switched from one job to another thinking I'm going to fix, work-life balance issues. Went to the new job, had all the same habits, got the same results. Nothing changed because I hadn't changed. And yet in 6 weeks, I could go to having different outcomes because I changed. Just me.
Such a great.
My marriage changed. My husband didn't get a coach or a therapist. I did. And yet our relationship changed. So don't underestimate the power of what you can change when you choose to, and you choose to get the right support. It is just powerful to see that in action.
It really is. And that's probably what crushes me most, just when I hear people say something with kind of a victim mindset of like, well, I had to do this because the family wanted to go out to eat here. And I'm like, but did you have to order that? Or did you have no say as the adult in the household that we couldn't go somewhere else? Or it's just that I don't care if like, the tangible thing of like the meal or anything like that. It's usually the empowerment in their voice or the lack of it. And one of the best phrases I've heard from a business coach is like, what if you had to? Because I was saying, no, I can't change this thing. And I can't find any more time in my day. And she's like, what if you had to? And I'm like, well, I can't. She's like, but what if you had to? And I'm like, like back against the wall, you have to do something. You have to change something. And that was a great challenge. And it just like broke me out of the box, or like that narrow view that I was just seeing life through. And I was like, oh, okay, so people can help me, and I can ask for help, and I can offload some things on my plate. I think that's such a great prompt for us to remember when things get really tough.
Yeah.
Well, I know we are approaching our time limit. I want to respect your time. The last couple of things I would love to ask is, what advice would you have for someone who's, probably already busy? Most of the people that are working with us don't have 5 hours free in their day that they're like, oh, what should I do to fill my time? So they're already probably busy, but they want to prioritize their health or growth in another area of their life. What advice would you have for them as they're kind of starting or potentially restarting that journey?
Awareness is always step one. So becoming aware about what are your barriers. For many of the women I work with, it's energy. Time. So time first. I have no time. And so what the first step I do is I help them use their time more productively, get more done with less time and energy. And then it's usually energy is the problem. So now how can we boost your energy so that you can have the energy to make the changes that you want to see? So I'd look at, what's the one area that you see, like prioritize. And then, okay, what's one tiny little thing that you can actually do? And as I said, take that high bar, put it on the ground. And so really simplify. We overcomplicate things, right? And we don't necessarily need to do that. So make it simple. Take a few minutes and think about, identify something, and then make a commitment that you're going to do one tiny thing about that on a regular basis, consistently, and then track it. And that can help get you moving in the right direction. And it doesn't, don't overcomplicate it. It doesn't have to be hard.
That's so perfect. So perfect. And last question, in a culture that normalizes very unhealthy things, it's very normal not to be healthy. It's very normal not to take care of ourselves. What would you like to normalize to help our whole population at the population level get healthier?
Being okay with prioritizing yourself. And I think that really applies especially to women who prioritize everyone else. And, the oxygen mask thing is so overused. Put your own oxygen mask on first. My program is called Flourish First, because I say, if you flourish first, everyone in your circle will benefit. You flourish first, and then serve the others. And not in a selfish way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I always see that too, of like any family or really anyone I work with, they're usually they have a family, they're serving others, they're working hard at work. Like if they have more capacity and more resilience, like that trickles on to other people around them. And I think that's so powerful as well. Wonderful, Erin. Where can people find you? You have retreats. Where's the best place to follow? Do you have a newsletter, social media? Where can we direct people?
Well, the biggest place on social media is I'm on LinkedIn. So Erin Hurley, MD. And then I'm still on Facebook and Instagram, not really on Instagram too much, too actively. And then I do have a website, Transformational Doc, DOC.com. And I have a podcast, Create Meaning in Medicine, that is lots of things we don't usually talk about for women in medicine is the main audience for that. And then the different work that I do one-on-one coaching, and I also do consulting for healthcare teams that are looking for sustainability in their workforce and figuring out ways to help with productivity and maintaining their staff, because that's a really tough thing in medicine right now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Erin. This was a pleasure. I'm sure I'll reach out to you again because I don't know how many questions we actually covered, but it was such a fantastic conversation. I learned so much, and I'm eager to do maybe a part 2 down the line. I would love that.
Sounds great. It was great to be here. Thanks so much, Allie.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope to see you in another one. Before you go, if you found this episode helpful, make sure you share with a friend. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you are not already. Feel free to share it on other social media. Also, make sure you follow along with the email list. That is the Free Ship Friday email list. And I send you free resources every single Friday to help you along your health journey. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.